right, we're back with more questions that we are going to answer today. And first of all, I want to thank you guys for being part of this and sending your questions. It means a lot that you guys are actually tuning in, watching what we're saying. And George made a big mistake by walking by my studio just before we shoot, so I grabbed him and brought him in because I thought he needed a little time as well. But let me jump right in, okay? It's Eddie Gonzalez out of Arizona asks, what are the landlord pros to having a gross lease? I think first let's talk about what a gross lease is.
Absolutely.
And then let's dive into
Absolutely. And so, essentially a gross lease, also known as a full service gross lease, is a lease in where the landlord is supplying almost everything for the space. This is typical for a lot of office buildings. Not as typical in retail, but typically you see this in office buildings and also in some smaller industrial type buildings. Yeah. What this means is that the landlord will also supply janitorial services, typically 5 days a week, as well as all the electricity, all the water. And then in addition to that, they will also have the HVAC being supplied. Yep. So that's different from a triple net lease where the tenant is responsible for all the expenses. So now the benefits for a gross lease, because a lot of people will hear triple net lease and they will like, well, why wouldn't you want the tenant to pay for everything? Well, the pros of having a gross lease, number one, is that you have a higher base rate. Okay, so triple net leases typically are lower in price because the tenant understands that they're going to have additional costs that they have to pay. So you're actually getting a higher base rental rate. Okay. That's number one. Number two is, and this is a little known fact, even though it's a gross lease, you know exactly what your expenses are. And typically the way the leases are structured, they have what they call a base year. And that's typically the year that the lease is signed. So if you signed a lease this year in 2022, you would have a base year of 2022. What that means is that you as the tenant are not responsible for any expenses based upon that base year. However, if the expenses go up, then you are actually responsible for the difference between what the base year was and what the new expense rate is for the following year. So a landlord can recapture that portion of it, but they know going into it right away that here are my expenses for this tenant. This is what they're always going to be. And if they can lower it, they actually get a benefit, because if they can lower the expenses, then guess what? It's not the tenant paying it, but you're still getting the higher base rate. So if you can actually figure out a way as a landlord to lower the expenses, you're making more money. So that's mainly the pro of having a gross lease for a landlord.
Seems like there'd be some motivation to get those expenses low.
Absolutely.
All right, George, stick around. I got two more questions. You want to be in if you want to do it?
You know what? Shoot them. Let's do it.
All right, we're going to jump right in then. All right, so the next question is it better to hire a property management company or to do it yourself? Now, we've done this little dance ourselves, right? We really, when we first started investing, we opted into just doing it ourselves. And let me tell you that the hiccups that we had, I think, is, number one was the amount of work it took. You need to know all the local laws. You need to have accounting systems that we really kind of put together as we're going along. Vendors, we slowly started. But now we were very fortunate that we were in real estate already. So we just reached out to friends to ask them, hey, who do you use for this? So the vendors to have in place. But again, the time. Now we started off with just a little 6-unit building, or actually a 10-unit building first, then a 6-unit. And, and they were in lower income areas. So they were there was a lot of hands-on work there.
Oh yeah, lots of hands-on work. So, I think ultimately though, if it's a good property management company, they can usually save the investor actually quite a bit of money. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one is that you have the immediate draw where a property management company is going to have a larger bandwidth to be able to service the clients, but also they're also going to have more work to offer their vendors. So they get specialized discounts that they should be passing along to the owners. So you can get work done a little bit cheaper. So that right there should save as well. In addition to that, the property management, a lot of people don't really take this into consideration, as you were talking about accounting systems, but larger property management system companies should have a very good property management software that most mom and pops either can't afford to use or it's too complicated to use. So the nice part about this, and some people say, well, what does that matter to me? Well, it saves on your taxes and your accounting expenses, because at the end of the year, everything gets put all in, and then you just forward it to your accountant and it's all done. So it makes it a lot easier for the accountant, and therefore a lot easier for you, and therefore you save a little bit more money on your tax returns when they're doing that. Lastly, when it comes to the property management companies, I think that the benefit that you have is the emergencies, something you didn't talk about.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of the things that I know, I actually dreaded holidays at a certain point, because that's typically where a lot of times in multifamily that you run into problems, because you have people visiting, it taxes the systems, you have a lot of blockages, or you may have a water heater burn out. And if you're, we've had this happen always, it seems, during Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Yeah, when everybody's visiting.
Trying to get a vendor in there, but also when you're trying to do your own holiday work with your family.
Yeah.
You're sitting there and you're actually dreading the time coming up. So, that's something to really take into consideration. Also,
well, I want to touch on on-site property manager.
And
On-site property manager, depends on your state, what the requirement is. Now, California is 16 units or more. You have to have an on-site property manager.
Absolutely.
Make sure if you're going to do it yourself, that person is excellent and they know how to handle these emergencies.
Well, more importantly, this actually has come up quite often in the last few years, is that a lot of on-site property managers are treated differently, or with mom and pops, what they do is they just give them free rent because they don't have the systems to put them in as employees.
Right.
Technically speaking, however, under the California labor laws, these are employees and they need to get in a W-2. You can actually only give a certain percentage of their rent as a concession. There actually has to be a exchange of dollars and for rent and whatnot. So you really need to keep track of that. You need to keep track of the hours. Make sure that there's not overtime, because if there is, they can come back to you even after you let them go or they move for lost wages, and you will be responsible. Meanwhile, a property management company, though, will have all those systems in place. Lastly, the one thing I do want to...
Hold on.
Yep.
We're not just in California, though.
No.
So depending on your state,
It
make
depends
sure
on
you
the state.
look at all how you are regulated. So.
And that also goes into what else a property management company does, is that they are extremely familiar with the local laws and what's changing and what's happening. And a lot of owners aren't aware of what may be affecting their properties until the last minute, which puts them behind the 8 ball, and they may have to hire somebody to do it quicker, which then is going to cost more money.
Yeah.
And the one thing I do want to say, though, is it really depends on your asset class as well, because, a lot of triple net properties or retail properties have it built into the lease that you actually can charge back a property management fee.
Yep.
That if you hire a property management company, you can charge back the property
A lot of
management
people
fee.
don't know that.
So you're not actually losing anything to having a professional helping you out. So it really depends on the property, the leases,
Size of the property.
the size of the properties, the leases, and the locality and knowing and understanding the local laws.
And the layer of anonymity.
Yeah.
That's what I like. It
Yes.
was, or would have liked. Because when I walk on a property, everybody came running, right? Hey, I need, or I want. And, it can be, you just have to be mentally prepared to handle that. So it really depends on how much you want to get into it. But make sure, again, the local laws, accounting systems, some experience is always good. Vendors, have great vendors, and make sure you have the time to do it right. Now, if you're going to hire a third-party vendor, if you're going to hire a property management company, you have to treat it like a business. Every month you need to check that accounting. Every month you need to walk your property, actually more than once a month. You need to go walk out and make sure that, everything is up to snuff. Treat it like it's a business. Check it as much as you can. So always treat it like it's a business, and I think you'll be fine. All right, so the final question for this video, is it better to have a commercial deal before finding equity and experienced partners in place, or vice versa? What's the first thought that you have?
First thought is, if you need an experienced partner, what are you bringing to the table?
Yeah.
Why can't they do this themselves? So if you don't have the money already lined up and to bring in an experienced partner, then there's no reason for them to actually use you or partner with you.
Because they're bringing the experience and the money.
Exactly.
So what are you going to do?
So either you need to get the experience by working with somebody and having a mentor that can help you with the syndications process and what they do, or you need to get the equity ahead of time and have that ready to go, and then bring in an experienced operator that can then help you with the syndication itself. It is a little bit cart before the horse, and
Sound familiar?
It sounds very
You're looking
familiar.
at two guys that have the same idea.
Yeah.
And this is what we were told. Until you have the experience. So we bought smaller buildings and we did it ourselves, no investors. And a 10 unit and a 6 unit were our first two. 10 unit, just our first one happened to be a home run. The second one, not so much. Probably learned the most from that one. But this is our recommendation, I think. And if I'm wrong, but I think you need to find a mentor. Find somebody that is working in the asset class that you want to be in, doing exactly what you want to do, and then find a way to bring that person value and have them mentor you. So there's a swap. You're bringing them value, they're giving you value, and you're learning from them. And but you have to bring them value. You can't just go to somebody and say, "Hey, I want you to teach me everything," because there's nothing in it for them. But always bring value.
And also think about the timing and deal flow as well, because even if you have the equity, and or let's say you have an amazing deal that it looks great. Number one, look at it from the seller's perspective. If it's really that good of a deal, they're not going to wait for you. There's going to be other investors that are interested in it. They're not going to wait for you to line up the equity and the partner. So you should have that ahead of time. To make things happen as quickly as possible, especially if it's a good deal. Number two is that understand timing. Bringing a commercial deal to a partner for the first time, it can take them weeks to analyze, underwrite the deal, and determine if this is something that they want to pursue. So by that time, if it really is a good deal, it should have been sold. So
our recommendation is find a mentor that you could really learn from, really learn the ins and outs. Save money, maybe start on a smaller deal and build it from there, or invest. You can, if you always invest with a bigger operator and start learning how they're doing it. Throw, it doesn't have to be a ton of money, but throw some money in with them, and but start learning it that way, and then gain their trust. So, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Pretty much covered everything there.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in, guys. And please keep these questions coming. We love answering them for you. And make sure you check out the video, give us a like. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.